Hello, fellow World of Warcraft fans. Blizzard has announced that the item levels in Season 2 of World of Warcraft Midnight will increase even more than originally planned. And why I personally think that's not a good idea, and that Blizzard is really pretty bad when it comes to so-called item level squishes. I'll show you in this video. Basically, I'm not necessarily trying to bash Blizzard here. But I have to say, from a gameplay perspective, I'm not a fan of these huge numbers. Here's footage from the final season of World of Warcraft: The War Within. My owl had 16 million HP there, and sometimes you were hitting enemies with crits of several million right in the face. Of course, and I know this myself, it's very much a matter of personal taste. Many players won't care. But we'll get to why these stat squishes can also have a bit of a negative impact. And in my opinion, it would be better if Blizzard consistently kept the numbers from getting so high. But alright, we'll take a look at all of this in this video. And feel free to write your opinion about it in the comments. Let's get started. As I said, here are the War Within scenes with 16 million HP. Basically, it doesn't actually change anything about your damage percentage-wise. Whether you hit a mob for 10 million or 100, as long as the HP is balanced for it, it really doesn't matter overall. You have to admit that. Nevertheless, I don't know, personally, I find it easier to calculate numbers and simulate things and whatever if we're not dealing with 16 million, but maybe with 1,600 or whatever. So I have to say, maybe it's a weird quirk, maybe it's just me, but I actually prefer these small numbers. Yeah, with the War Within, or with the end of the War Within transitioning to Midnight, there was the next big stat squish. We went from item levels well over 700 down to now, yeah, around 290. For people who are well equipped, and normally with a new season, the item level always increases by about 39. That's what we see here. But Blizzard has commented on this again and now said that in Season 2, the item level will jump up by 46 and not just 39. The reason is simple. Season 2 should still feel like you're getting meaningful upgrades. For example, through upgrades. The empty cores and better loot, for example, from the Spawnful raid, have caused the item levels to shoot up quite a bit. So you could already equip item level 298 in some cases. And originally, the maximum in the new season would have been 338. Now that's being increased, so we'll reach up to 345. And Blizzard is saying that those 39 didn't feel quite as rewarding. The whole thing is going a bit higher. If we take a look at the current game, we're already at the point where with item level 290, you end up with around 500k HP, give or take. So if you're a class that wields two-handers or something like that, your HP is quite a bit higher. It always depends a bit. One thing we'll also be getting is the fact that players' HP will basically be increased by 25. Blizzard explained this by saying that healing shouldn't feel like walking a razor's edge. So in the end, we all get 25 more HP, but the mobs will deal 25 more damage as well. Honestly, in my opinion, that doesn't really change much. But we will see how it turns out in the end. So, in other words, with a well-equipped character, you'll already reach over 600,000 HP in the new season. On top of that, there are the new item levels that you can earn. And if you take a look at the current season, at the beginning, items at normal item level, let's take a necklace as an example, gave 635 stamina. By now, with higher level items, we're back to almost 1,000. So that's an increase of about 400 stamina. Accordingly, you can assume that if another 46 item levels are added, each slot will probably have about 400 to 500 more stamina. We can see here that my base stamina is 18,400. And with the gear, my total health increases to 460,000. So we'll definitely see another jump of several 100,000. By the end of the second season, we should reach around 800,000 or 900,000 HP. And that's not even a year after the item level squish was implemented. If this keeps escalating, there will be a third season and they'll probably add another 46 item levels. That means we'll end up at almost 400, and I think that's an unbelievable increase. So within one expansion, yeah, with just a single expansion, we've basically thrown out more than half of the value that we were originally reset to. If you look at it, normal dungeons at the beginning gave 214, world quests gave, I don't know, around 220, quest gear was 207. So at the end of the expansion, yeah, from quest gear to the best items, that's an increase of about 200 item levels. I always like to compare that to Wrath of the Lich King, where at the beginning in, I don't know, heroic dungeons and other stuff, you ended up with around 180 or so. And in the final raid, something around 270 dropped. So in a single expansion, they raised the item level by maybe 80 to 90 now. That's sometimes doubled or even more. Yeah, personally, I think Blizzard is really, really bad when it comes to these item level squishes. And all of that just so it really feels to the players like they're doing more damage now. Honestly, I would personally prefer the whole thing to just increase slowly. And yeah, then in the first patch, you just do 100,000 or 50,000 DPS, and in the second one, 55,000. That would be totally enough for me personally. But as we can see from these numbers, for the majority of players, that doesn't seem meaningful enough, and that's why it keeps skyrocketing. And in the end, that leads to Blizzard having to keep lowering these item levels more and more, and that causes problems in the early game. Not that this is particularly important, to be honest. Honestly, no one cares about leveling, but we've already seen in some cases that gear drops or buffs in the starting areas give you 0 stats. And that's basically the reason, or that's why when the stats get squished at max level, I don't know, maybe with 15 mastery, you get 0.5%, just as an example. If even low-level buff food and so on had just 1 mastery on it, it would make low-level chars way too OP. That just leads to some items not giving any kind of bonus at all, or like you saw with the buff food. And I have to say, well, it doesn't really matter to me personally since I'm not in that leveling phase anymore, but for new players, I've read quite a lot about that. Lately, it just feels kind of stupid to get theoretical upgrades or new buff foods and elixirs where you get 0 stats from them. And we can see that this whole thing just drags on like a chain reaction, and I don't know if it's time to stop just making constant adjustments and actually completely overhaul the gear structure. In other words, with a new expansion, the maximum isn't just slightly lowered, but really all gear in the game would only be given in levels, I don't know, from 0 to 80. It increases more slowly than before, stats included. And then you just try in the patches to maybe only go up 20 item levels with each patch instead of 40 or even almost 50. In my opinion, that would make the item level squishes much more pleasant, and above all wouldn't give you the feeling, okay, now an expansion is over and you can basically compress everything again. In other words, if Blizzard keeps going like this, by the next expansion at the latest, we'll be back to something like 20 million HP, and in my opinion, that kind of misses the point of these squishes. But yeah, let me know your opinion about this in the comments. I'm curious if it's just me who feels this way. Thanks for watching, see you next time, take care.